I'll never forget the exact temperature of that conference room. 72 degrees, according to the thermostat on the wall. But when he said those words, my body burned like I was standing in fire. It was Tuesday, the quarterly review meeting. 23 people packed around that massive oak table, laptops open, coffee cups half empty, the smell of someone's vanilla latte mixing with nervous energy. I'd been with the company for 4 years. 4 years of arriving early, staying late, fixing problems that weren't mine to fix. 4 years of being the person everyone came to when things went wrong. I was presenting the Q3 analysis, my analysis built from 3 weeks of after-hours work, data I'd personally verified, insights that could save the company millions. My voice was steady, professional. I'd rehearsed this presentation 17 times. Then Marcus, my boss, leaned back in his leather chair. He wasn't even looking at the screen. He was looking at me. And he smiled. Not a kind smile. The kind of smile a cat gives a mouse before the final pounce. "Can I interrupt you for just a second?" His voice dripped with casual cruelty. The room went quiet. Everyone's eyes shifted from my presentation to him. "I just want to make something clear to everyone here." He paused, letting the silence build. "This analysis? The recommendations being presented? They're cute. Really. But let's be honest about something." My heart started hammering. I felt my grip tighten on the remote control in my hand. He turned to face me directly, his smile widening. Then in front of the entire leadership team, the VPs, the senior directors, people I'd worked with for years, he said it. "You're nothing." 2 words. 10 letters. A lifetime of humiliation. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick, suffocating, alive. I heard someone's pen drop. I heard the hum of the projector. I heard my own pulse pounding in my ears like a war drum. 23 pairs of eyes. Some looking down at their notes. Some frozen in shock. Some, and this hurt worse than anything, some trying not to smile. My face went hot. That specific, horrible heat that starts in your chest and floods upward until you're sure everyone can see you glowing red. My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against the table. "You're a support player," Marcus continued, leaning forward now, elbows on the table, speaking to the room but performing for me. "You crunch numbers. You make charts. That's valuable, sure. But strategy? Vision? Leadership?" He laughed, actually laughed. "That's not your lane. Let's not confuse effort with capability." I should have said something. Defended myself. Shown the data proving every recommendation came from research he'd never even seen. But my throat had closed. Words died before they could form. Jennifer from marketing was staring at her laptop screen like it held the secrets of the universe. David from finance coughed and took a long sip of water. No one met my eyes. "So let's move on to the real strategic discussion," Marcus said, clicking to the next slide, his slide which was just my analysis repackaged with his name in the corner. "I've been working on something that might actually move the needle." I stood there for another 40 seconds while he presented my work as his own. Then I sat down, my legs barely holding me. The meeting continued. People nodded along, asked Marcus questions, complimented his insights. I didn't cry. Not then. I wouldn't give him that. But something was happening inside me. Something was cracking. Not breaking, cracking. Like ice over a frozen lake when the temperature starts to rise. The meeting ended at 3:47 p.m. I know because I stared at the clock for the last 13 minutes, watching each second tick by, wondering if time could move backward, if I could unsay my decision to present, to try, to care. People filed out. Some walked past me without a word. A few, Jessica from HR, Tom from operations, gave me these tight, sympathetic smiles that somehow made it worse. Marcus was the last to leave. As he passed my chair, he leaned down, close enough that only I could hear. "Don't take it personally," he whispered. "Someone has to stay in their place." Then he walked out, whistling. I sat alone in that conference room for 11 minutes. The projector was still running, showing Marcus's title slide, my analysis under his name. My phone buzzed. An email. From the CEO's assistant. "Request for you to join meeting tomorrow 9 a.m. CEO office." regarding Q3 presentation and strategic recommendations. My stomach dropped. Was this it? Was I about to be fired for embarrassing the company? For wasting everyone's time with my cute analysis? Or was something else happening here? I packed my laptop, walked to my car, drove home on autopilot. And I did not cry. Not yet. I didn't turn on the lights when I got home. Just walked straight through the door, dropped my bag on the floor, and stood in the darkness of my living room. Still wearing my blazer, still feeling the weight of those 2 words on my chest like a stone. You're nothing. The silence in my apartment was different from the silence in that conference room. This silence was mine. Private. Safe. And in this silence alone, the walls I'd built to survive the meeting finally collapsed. I sat on the floor, right there, in the middle of the living room, still in my work clothes, and I let myself feel everything I'd suppressed for the last 4 hours. The humiliation first. That burning shame that makes you want to peel off your own skin. The memory of 23 faces, some pitying, some uncomfortable, some quietly pleased, watching me get dismantled. Then came the rage. Hot and sharp and shocking in its intensity. How dare he? How dare he take my work, my research, my late nights and early mornings, and reduce me to nothing in front of everyone? How dare he smile while doing it? But underneath the rage was something worse. Something I didn't want to admit but couldn't ignore. Doubt. What if he was right? I replayed every project I'd ever worked on. Every idea I'd pitched. Every time I'd been passed over for a promotion, told maybe next quarter, given more responsibility but no more recognition. What if I really was just a support player? What if my ceiling really was making charts and crunching numbers while people like Marcus took credit and climbed higher? I thought about my father, who'd worked 30 years in middle management, and retired with a handshake and a watch. I thought about my mother, who'd told me to keep my head down, work hard, don't make waves. I thought about every time I'd swallowed my words, accepted someone else's name on my work, told myself it was about the team. Maybe Marcus was just saying what everyone else was thinking. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the sky outside to go from gray to black. Long enough for my legs to go numb. Long enough to seriously consider walking into his office tomorrow and quitting. Just quitting. Walking away from all of it. My phone kept buzzing. I ignored it. Until I didn't. I picked it up. 17 messages in the team channel. I almost didn't read them. But curiosity, or maybe masochism, won. Tough meeting today. From Jennifer. Marcus was brutal. From someone whose name I didn't recognize. But then, buried in the thread, a message from David in finance. For what it's worth, I pulled the metadata on those slides. Original author and creation date don't match what Marcus presented. Just saying. My breath caught. 3 minutes later, another message, this time from Tom in operations. That supply chain recommendation in the presentation? I've been trying to get Marcus to consider that for 6 months. He said it was impossible. Suddenly it's his idea. Then Jessica from HR, in a direct message. Are you okay? That meeting was inappropriate. I'm documenting it. Just so you know. I read those messages 5 times. Then 10 times. Something shifted in my chest. The weight didn't disappear, but it changed shape. They saw it. At least some of them saw what really happened. I stood up, turned on the lights, walked to my home office and opened my laptop. The CEO meeting was tomorrow at 9 a.m. I had 14 hours. I opened my files. Not the sanitized presentation Marcus had used. My original files. The real analysis. The data sources. The projection models. The timeline showing exactly when each recommendation was researched, drafted, revised. And I started building something new. Not a defensive document. Not a complaint. Something better. If Marcus wanted to take credit for my strategy, fine. Let him. But if the CEO was asking questions, I was going to have answers. Real answers. Detailed answers. The kind of answers that come from someone who actually did the work. I worked until 3 a.m. My eyes burned. My back ached. But for the first time since that meeting, I felt something other than shame and rage. I felt clarity. Marcus had made a critical mistake. He'd humiliated me publicly, yes. He'd taken credit for my work, yes. But in doing so, he'd also attached his reputation to my ideas. And if those ideas succeeded, when those ideas succeeded, everyone would look to him for details he couldn't provide. I wouldn't quit. I wouldn't fade away. I wouldn't stay in my place. I would wait. I would work. And I would let the truth be so undeniable that even he couldn't spin it away. At 3:47 a.m., exactly 12 hours after the meeting ended, I closed my laptop. Tomorrow, I would walk into that CEO's office. I would answer every question. I would provide every detail. And I would do it without ever mentioning Marcus's name. I would let my work speak. Because here's what Marcus didn't understand. Your nothing isn't a fact. It's a challenge. And I was about to accept it. The CEO's office was on the 47th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Minimalist furniture. Abstract art that probably cost more than my annual salary. I'd been in this office exactly twice before. Once for new hire orientation 4 years ago. Once for a company-wide town hall. I arrived at 8:52 a.m. 8 minutes early. Professional, not desperate. Sarah Chun, the CEO, was already there. So was Richard Moss, the CFO. No Marcus. Interesting. Thank you for coming, Sarah said, gesturing to a chair. Her voice was neutral. Unreadable. I wanted to discuss yesterday's presentation. My heart hammered, but I kept my expression calm. Of course. The supply chain optimization recommendations, Richard said, pulling up a document on his tablet. The international expansion timeline. The cost reduction strategies. These are ambitious proposals. They are, I agreed. Sarah leaned forward. Marcus presented them as his strategic vision. But I've been in this business 28 years. I know the difference between someone reciting slides and someone who lived in the data. She paused. So I'm going to ask you directly. Who developed this analysis? The room went very quiet. I could have deflected. Could have given Marcus partial credit. Could have played it safe. Instead, I opened my laptop. I did, I said simply. And I can show you exactly how. For the next 45 minutes, I walked them through everything. Not defensively. Not emotionally. Just methodically. I showed them the original data sources. The projection models. The supplier interviews I'd conducted. The competitive analysis. The risk assessment matrices. The timeline of development. Every file stamped with dates and author metadata. I showed them the email I'd sent Marcus 3 weeks ago with the initial findings. His response. Interesting. Let me think about it. I showed them the revised draft I'd sent 2 weeks ago. His response. Some potential here. I showed them the final version I'd sent 1 week ago. His response. I'll take this from here. Sarah and Richard didn't interrupt. They just listened. Watched. Took notes. When I finished, Sarah sat back in her chair. Why didn't you speak up yesterday? When he presented this as his own? I'd thought about this question all night. Because speaking up in that moment would have looked like ego. Like defensiveness. I trusted that the quality of the work would eventually speak for itself. I paused. I was right. Richard almost smiled. Almost. We'd like you to implement phase 1, Sarah said. Directly. Report to me weekly on progress. Marcus will be informed, but this is your project now. My throat tightened. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Sarah said. You're going to have to deliver. And Marcus isn't going to make it easy. I know. Good. She stood, extending her hand. Show me what you can do. I walked out of that office at 10:17 a.m. Took the elevator down to my floor. Walked past Marcus's office. His door was closed, but I could hear him on a call, his voice animated, confident. He had no idea what had just happened. And I wasn't going to tell him. Not yet. I spent the next 2 weeks working like I'd never worked before. Not frantically. Strategically. I built timelines. Established metrics. Identified key stakeholders. Started implementation quietly, methodically, without fanfare. Marcus noticed something was different. I could tell by the way he watched me in meetings. The way he'd pause when walking past my desk. But I gave him nothing. No confrontation. No attitude. Just professional courtesy and minimal conversation. You've been quiet lately, he said one afternoon, appearing at my cubicle. Just focused on work, I replied, not looking up from my screen. Right. Work. He lingered for a moment, then walked away. I wasn't the only one noticing changes. David from finance started including me in strategy calls. Tom from operations asked for my input on vendor negotiations. Jessica from HR scheduled a check-in coffee that felt more like an alliance-building session. People are talking, she said carefully. About the CEO meeting. About your project. Let them talk, I said. Marcus is asking questions. He's trying to figure out what happened. He'll find out soon enough. She studied my face. You're different. Since that meeting. I met her eyes. Yes, I am. Because here's what I'd learned. Humiliation doesn't have to destroy you. It can forge you. Every time I remembered that conference room, that silence, those two words, you're nothing, instead of crumbling, I worked harder, smarter, quieter. I stopped seeking approval. Stopped hoping Marcus would notice my contributions. Stopped waiting for permission to be excellent. I just was. Phase 1 of the project launched in week 3. The results were immediate. Supply chain costs dropped by 18%. Delivery times improved by 23%. The CFO sent a company-wide email praising the innovative strategic initiative. Marcus's name wasn't mentioned. Mine was. And that's when I knew. The real battle was about to begin. The email hit everyone's inbox at 8:03 a.m. on a Thursday. Subject line. Q4 Strategic Initiative Update, Exceptional Results. I was making coffee in the break room when I heard the pings. Dozens of phones, all at once, like a synchronized orchestra of notifications. David walked in, staring at his phone, and looked at me with something I hadn't seen before. Respect. Did you see this? He asked. I glanced at my own phone. The email was from Sarah Chun, sent to the entire company leadership, over 300 people. And it was about my project. My actual, undeniable, documented project. The supply chain optimization initiative, led by my name, has exceeded all projected targets. Cost reduction, 18.3%. Efficiency improvement, 23.7%. Customer satisfaction scores, up 31%. This represents the most successful operational transformation in the past 6 years. Congratulations to the team, and special recognition to my name, for visionary strategic development and flawless execution. Visionary strategic development. Those were Marcus's words. The exact phrase he'd used to describe himself in that meeting. Now they were attached to me, in writing from the CEO, sent to everyone. I took a sip of my coffee. It tasted like vindication. Jennifer from marketing rushed in. Oh my God, have you seen? She stopped when she saw my face. You knew. I knew the results, I said calmly. I didn't know Sarah would send that email. But I'd hoped. Oh, how I'd hoped. I walked back to my desk. The path felt different. People looked up as I passed. Some nodded. Some smiled. A few even said congratulations. The atmosphere had shifted. The invisible hierarchy, the one where Marcus stood at the top and I lingered somewhere in the middle, had suddenly become visible. And I was higher than anyone expected. Marcus's office door was closed. But through the glass wall, I could see him on his phone, his body language sharp, aggressive. He was pacing. His free hand kept running through his hair. He knew. At 10:15 a.m. he emerged. His face was a careful mask of professional neutrality, but his eyes were furious. He walked straight to my desk. Congratulations on the project results, he said, loud enough for people nearby to hear. His voice was friendly, almost warm, but I'd learned to hear what lived underneath words. Thank you, I replied, matching his tone exactly. I'd love to discuss the next phase. Can we meet this afternoon? I have a meeting with Sarah at 2. How about tomorrow? Something flickered across his face. Meeting with Sarah? Weekly progress update. Standard project protocol. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Of course. Tomorrow then. He walked away, and I heard him mutter something to his assistant. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. He was scrambling. At 2 p.m., I walked into Sarah's office for our scheduled meeting. She closed the door. "How's Marcus handling this?" she asked directly. "Professionally," I lied. Then reconsidered. "Outwardly professionally. But he's trying to regain control of the narrative." "Let him try." Sarah pulled up a presentation on her screen. "I want to talk about phase 2. And I want to talk about your long-term trajectory here." For the next 40 minutes, we discussed expansion. Not just of the project, of my role. New responsibilities. New scope. New visibility. "You'll still report through Marcus organizationally," Sarah said. "But on strategic initiatives, you report directly to me. I'm making that formal." My chest tightened. That's going to create tension. "It already exists. We're just making it official." She looked at me carefully. "Can you handle that?" I thought about that conference room. That silence. Those 2 words. "Yes," I said. "I can handle it." What I didn't say. I was counting on it. Because Marcus's biggest weakness wasn't his cruelty. It was his ego. And egos don't respond well to losing control. I knew exactly what would happen next. He'd try to undermine the project. Find flaws. Create obstacles. Position himself as the steadying hand correcting my overly ambitious approach. And I was going to let him try. Because every attempt would be documented. Every obstruction would be visible. Every move he made against me would expose him further. Phase 2 launched the following week. Marcus inserted himself into every meeting. Questioned every decision. Sent long emails to Sarah expressing concerns about timeline, budget, scope. I didn't fight him. I just delivered. Every milestone on time. Every metric, exceeding targets. Every concern he raised, I addressed with data. With evidence. With results. 6 weeks into phase 2, Richard the CFO stopped me in the hallway. "I've been watching something interesting," he said quietly. "Every time Marcus tries to slow down your project, it somehow accelerates. Every concern he raises gets resolved before it becomes a real problem. It's almost like..." He paused. "It's almost like you're 3 steps ahead of him." I met his eyes. I learned from experience. He smiled. A real smile. "Keep doing exactly what you're doing." That night, I got an email from Marcus. Sent at 11:47 p.m. Subject line: "We need to talk." The message was brief. "My office. First thing tomorrow." I read it twice. Felt the old fear trying to surface. The instinct to appease, to smooth things over, to make myself smaller. Then I remembered the conference room. The silence. The way he'd smiled. I hit reply. "I have a meeting with Sarah at 9 a.m. Available after 11. I didn't wait for his response. The next morning, I walked past his office at 8:47 a.m. He was already there, watching. I didn't look at him. Just kept walking. When I emerged from Sarah's office at 10:53 a.m., he was waiting in the hallway. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Now." "Of course," I replied. "Your office." We walked in silence. He closed the door. Sat behind his desk. Tried to reclaim the power position. I sat across from him and waited. "I'm going to be direct," he said. "This project was supposed to be a team effort. But you've turned it into a personal showcase." "The project was always mine," I said calmly. "That's documented." "Documented?" He laughed bitterly. "You went behind my back to the CEO." I answered questions honestly when asked. "You undermined me." "I did my job." His face flushed. "You think you're untouchable now? Because Sarah sent one email? Because one project went well?" He leaned forward. "You're still nothing. You'll always be nothing. One success doesn't change that." There it was. That word again. Nothing. But this time something was different. This time, I didn't feel the heat of shame. I felt the cold clarity of certainty. "You're right," I said quietly. "One success doesn't change anything." I stood up. "Which is why I'm going to deliver 10 more." And I walked out. Marcus stopped pretending to be friendly after that conversation. The mask came off completely. He moved my desk. Literally had facilities move it while I was in a meeting, from my quiet corner to a high-traffic area next to the break room. Better for collaboration, his email said. He removed me from email chains I'd been on for years. When I asked about it, he said, streamlining communication. He scheduled critical project meetings during my Sarah updates, then sent passive-aggressive messages about my attendance issues. He assigned me additional work, menial tasks, administrative busy work, timed perfectly to interfere with strategic project deadlines. Every move was calculated. Every action had plausible deniability. He was trying to bury me under so much interference that I'd either crack, quit, or fail. I did none of those things. Instead, I documented everything. Screenshots, email chains, calendar conflicts, task assignments. I built a timeline of obstruction that was so detailed, so undeniable, that it became its own story. But I didn't send it to HR. Not yet. Because Marcus was making a bigger mistake than he realized. He was forcing me to build relationships at every level of the company just to get my work done. When he blocked my access to budget reports, I went directly to David in finance. David gave me access and started copying me on strategic financial updates. When he excluded me from vendor meetings, I reached out to Tom in operations. Tom started inviting me to leadership planning sessions Marcus didn't even know about. When he tried to claim credit for Phase 2 results in a board presentation, Jennifer from marketing quietly sent me the draft beforehand. I sent Sarah a context document that same evening. Marcus was isolating me from his world. But in doing so, he was pushing me into a much larger one. You're building something, Jessica from HR said during one of our coffee meetings. An entire network that exists around Marcus, not through him. I'm just trying to do my job, I said. She smiled. No, you're doing much more than that. She was right. I was learning things I'd never known before. How decisions really got made. Who the real power brokers were. Which leaders were rising, which were stagnating. And I was learning how to navigate it all. The company's annual strategy summit was scheduled for early December. 3 days of presentations, planning sessions, and leadership discussions. Invitations went to top executives, board members, and select high performers. I wasn't invited. Marcus was, of course. And he made sure I knew it. Summit next week, he said, stopping by my relocated desk. I'll be presenting the strategic vision for next year. Obviously focused on the supply chain initiative. He smiled. I'll send you a recap afterward. That's thoughtful, I replied neutrally. What I didn't tell him. Sarah had invited me 3 days earlier. Not to attend as an observer. To present. The summit began on a Tuesday. Morning sessions featured the usual suspects. Marcus, other senior directors, VP-level presentations. I sat in the back, took notes, stayed invisible. Then Wednesday afternoon arrived. Next up, Sarah announced to the room of about 60 leaders, we have a strategic initiative presentation that I think will reshape how we think about operational excellence. She looked directly at me. Please welcome our supply chain optimization lead. I stood up, walked to the front of the room, set up my laptop, and saw Marcus's face. He was sitting 3 rows back, and the color had drained from his skin. He clearly hadn't looked at the agenda, hadn't realized, hadn't prepared for this moment. I had. Thank you, Sarah, I began. Today I want to talk about something bigger than supply chain optimization. I want to talk about organizational potential, how we identify it, develop it, and deploy it effectively. For the next 35 minutes, I presented a comprehensive strategic framework, not just about supply chain, about talent development, leadership identification, creating systems that reward actual contribution rather than proximity to power. I showed data, results, case studies, including my own project. I showed the before, an initiative stalled in endless review cycles, and the after, rapid implementation, exceptional results. I never mentioned Marcus by name. I didn't have to. The room was completely silent. But this time, the silence was attention, respect, interest. When I finished, the questions came rapid fire. From the CFO, from board members, from VPs I'd never spoken to before. Marcus sat frozen in his chair. Then Richard, the CFO, asked the question that changed everything. This framework you've developed, this talent identification system, have you mapped it against our current organization? I have, I said carefully. And what did you find? I paused. This was it. The moment. I could play it safe, give a generic answer, avoid direct conflict. Or I could tell the truth. I looked at Sarah. She gave me the smallest nod. I found that we have significant gaps between stated values and actual practice, I said. We say we reward innovation, but we often promote people who maintain status quo. We say we value collaboration, but we sometimes reward those who take credit for others' work. We say we want diverse perspectives, but we frequently silence voices that challenge existing power structures. The room was so quiet I could hear someone's phone vibrating. And I found, I continued, that our best people, the ones driving real results, are often invisible to leadership because they're buried under managers who fear their capabilities rather than champion them. Marcus stood up abruptly. I think this has gone beyond the scope of. Sit down, Marcus, Sarah said quietly. He sat. Continue, Sarah said to me. I took a breath. If we want to compete in the next decade, we need to rethink everything. Not just supply chain. Not just operations. Our entire approach to leadership development. I presented 3 more slides. A proposed new framework. Implementation timeline. Expected outcomes. When I finished, the room erupted in discussion. Not applause, something better. Debate. Engagement. Real interest. Sarah stood. I'd like to form a task force to explore this framework. Recommendations for members. 5 people spoke up. David from finance. Tom from operations. Jennifer from marketing. 2 VPs I'd never worked with directly. Not one person suggested Marcus. The session ended at 4:47 p.m. People approached me afterward. Business cards. Requests for follow-up meetings. One board member even asked if I'd considered moving into an executive leadership track. Marcus disappeared without speaking to anyone. That evening, back in my hotel room, I finally let myself feel it. The vindication. The validation. The sheer, overwhelming proof that I wasn't nothing. I had never been nothing. My phone buzzed. A text from Jessica. Everyone's talking about your presentation. You absolutely killed it. Then another from David. Marcus left the summit early. Took an emergency call. He's panicking. And finally one from Sarah. My office. Friday morning. Time to discuss your future. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, looking out at the city lights below, and realized something profound. Revenge wasn't about destroying Marcus. It was about becoming so undeniably excellent that his opinion became irrelevant. And I was almost there. Almost. Friday morning. Sarah's office. 9 a.m. I arrived at 8:53. Noticed Marcus's door was open but his office was empty. Unusual for a Friday. He always came in early to set the tone for the week's end, as he liked to say. Sarah's assistant waved me through immediately. But when I entered, I realized this wasn't our normal check-in. Richard, the CFO, was there. So was Patricia Valdez, the Chief People Officer, and James Morrison, the board's executive committee chair. This was bigger than I'd expected. Please sit, Sarah said. Her expression was serious but not unkind. We need to discuss some things that have come to our attention. My stomach dropped. Was this about Marcus? Had he filed some complaint? Built a case against me? Over the past 3 months, Patricia began, opening a folder. We've received multiple reports about workplace conduct concerns. Initially, they seemed isolated. But when we started investigating, a pattern emerged. She slid the folder across the table. I opened it carefully. What I saw made my breath catch. Email threads. Calendar screenshots. Project documentation. But they weren't mine. They were complaints. About Marcus. From 7 different people. Dating back 18 months. We should have acted sooner, Patricia said quietly. That's on us. But your summit presentation catalyzed something. It gave people language for what they'd been experiencing. Within 24 hours of your talk, 3 more people came forward. I read through the documents. Stories that echoed my own. Credit taken for others' work. Public humiliation disguised as tough feedback. Strategic obstruction. A pattern so clear it was damning. Why are you showing me this? I asked. James Morrison leaned forward. Because you're the one who broke the pattern. You documented everything. You built undeniable proof of your contributions. And most importantly, you did it without vengeance. You just kept delivering excellence. He paused. We need to understand what happened from your perspective. The full story. So I told them. Not emotionally. Just factually. The conference room meeting. The 2 words. The CEO meeting that followed. Every obstruction, every attempt at sabotage, every move Marcus made to bury my work. And you never filed a formal complaint, Patricia observed. No, I admitted. I didn't think anyone would believe me. He was the director. I stopped myself. I thought the work would speak louder than a complaint. It did, Sarah said. But this can't continue. We're conducting a formal investigation. Marcus has been placed on administrative leave as of this morning. My heart hammered. Administrative leave? The pattern is too clear to ignore, Richard said. And it's not just about interpersonal conflict. There are questions about project ownership, intellectual property, even potential violations of our ethics code. He looked at me directly. Your documentation has been invaluable. What happens now? I asked. That depends on several things, Sarah said. The investigation will take 2 to 3 weeks. But in the interim, we need to talk about restructuring the department. And we need to talk about your role in that restructure. They spent the next hour outlining a vision I'd never imagined. A new operational excellence division. Cross-functional authority. Direct reports. Strategic influence at the highest levels. We're not offering you Marcus's position, Sarah clarified. We're offering you something bigger. A seat at the table where strategy gets made, not just executed. I sat there, trying to process it all. 6 months ago, I was nothing. Today, I was being offered the kind of role I'd assumed would take another decade to reach. I need to be honest with you, I said carefully. I'm not doing this for revenge. I never was. If this is about punishing Marcus. It's not, Patricia interrupted gently. It's about accountability. There's a difference. And excellence, James added. You've demonstrated the kind of leadership we need. The kind that lifts others up instead of tearing them down. That's rare. The meeting ended at 11:30. As I stood to leave, Sarah caught my arm. That day in the conference room, she said quietly. When he said those words to you, do you remember what you did right after? I sat down, I said. I didn't respond. No. You didn't shrink. Your posture stayed straight. Your expression stayed neutral. And your eyes, she smiled slightly. Your eyes stayed on the data on the screen, not on him. I was watching. I noticed. She paused. That's when I knew you were stronger than he'd ever be. I walked back to my desk in a daze. People glanced at me differently now. Word traveled fast in corporate environments. Marcus gone, investigation underway, power structures shifting. My phone buzzed constantly. Messages of support. Questions about what happened. A few brave souls even asking if the rumors were true. I responded to none of them. Not yet. At 2:17 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Hello. Silence. Then breathing. Then finally. You think you've won. Marcus. I'm not trying to win anything, I said carefully. You destroyed my career. My reputation. Everything I built. His voice was shaking, rage, fear, desperation all mixed together. For what? Because I hurt your feelings in one meeting. No, I said quietly. Because you hurt 7 people across 18 months. Because you stole work and crushed spirits and created a culture of fear. I was just the one who stopped accepting it. They'll see through you eventually, he hissed. They'll realize you're just vindictive, manipulative. Goodbye, Marcus, I said. And hung up. My hands were shaking. Not from fear. From the finality of it. This wasn't over yet. The investigation would take weeks. There would be interviews, reviews, difficult conversations. But the truth was already visible. And truth, once seen, can't be unseen. That evening, I sat in my apartment, the same spot where I'd collapsed 6 months ago. And I didn't cry. I smiled. Because I'd learned something profound. The opposite of nothing isn't everything. It's enough. And I was finally, undeniably, enough. 3 weeks. That's how long the investigation took. 3 weeks of interviews, document reviews, testimony from current employees, former employees, even vendors who'd worked with Marcus's team. The pattern was worse than anyone had realized. I wasn't called to testify until day 16. Patricia Valdez, the chief people officer, conducted my interview personally. "We need you to walk us through everything," she said. "Not just the conference room incident. Everything before and everything after." So I did. 4 hours of detailed testimony. I showed them my documentation, every email, every project file, every piece of evidence I'd quietly collected. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Patricia asked at one point. I thought about that question carefully. Because I didn't trust that the system would believe me over him. Because I'd seen other people try to report issues and get labeled as difficult, or not a team player. Because I thought the only way to prove my worth was to be so undeniably excellent that no one could question it. "That shouldn't have been necessary," she said quietly. "No," I agreed. "It shouldn't have been. But it was." On day 21, the investigation concluded. Sarah called an emergency leadership meeting. Not the usual weekly check-in. A formal gathering of all directors, VPs, and executive leadership. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to attend until Sarah's assistant personally came to my desk. "Sarah wants you there," she said simply. The conference room, the same conference room where it had all begun, was packed. Every chair filled. People standing along the walls. I took a seat near the back. Tried to make myself invisible. Sarah walked in at exactly 2 p.m. Her expression was grave. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," she began. "As most of you know, we've been conducting an investigation into serious workplace conduct violations. That investigation has concluded." The room was dead silent. "The findings are deeply troubling. Over an 18-month period, we documented a pattern of credit misappropriation, intellectual property violations, hostile work environment creation, and systematic suppression of employee contributions." She paused. "These violations were committed by Marcus Chin, former Director of Operations Strategy." Former. The word hung in the air. Marcus's employment with this company has been terminated, effective immediately. Additionally, we'll be reviewing all projects attributed to him over the past 2 years to ensure proper credit is assigned to the actual contributors. Murmurs rippled through the room. "But this isn't just about one person," Sarah continued. "This investigation revealed systemic failures. We failed to create an environment where people felt safe reporting misconduct. We failed to verify attribution on strategic work. We failed to notice when talented people were being systematically undermined." Her voice hardened. "That ends now." She outlined new policies. Mandatory attribution protocols. Anonymous reporting systems. Regular audits of project ownership. Third-party review of promotion decisions. "And one more thing," Sarah said. "We're restructuring our operations division. Creating a new role. Vice President of Operational Excellence and Strategic Innovation." My heart stopped. This role will oversee not just supply chain optimization, but talent development, process innovation, and cultural transformation. It requires someone who understands both strategy and people. Someone who has demonstrated exceptional results while maintaining integrity. She looked directly at me. "Which is why I'm pleased to announce that this role will be filled by the person whose work catalyzed these necessary changes." Every head in the room turned toward me. "Please join me in congratulating our new VP of Operational Excellence." The applause started slowly, then built. People standing, smiling. Some like David, Tom, and Jennifer, cheering openly. I stood up, my legs shaking, and walked to the front of the room. Sarah shook my hand. "You earned this," she said quietly. "Not because of what happened to Marcus. Because of what you built despite him." When the meeting ended, people crowded around. Congratulations. Questions about the new division. Requests for one-on-one meetings. But the moment that mattered most came 2 hours later. I was packing up my desk. They were moving me to an actual office on the executive floor, when a young woman I'd never spoken to before approached hesitantly. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said. "I'm Alicia. I work in data analytics." "Not a bother at all," I said. "What can I do for you?" "I just wanted to say thank you." Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "My manager, he's been taking credit for my work for over a year. I thought I was crazy. I thought maybe I wasn't good enough, maybe I was imagining things." She took a shaky breath. "But watching what you did, documenting everything, staying professional, letting the work speak, it showed me I'm not crazy. And it showed me there's a way forward." I felt my own throat tighten. "You're not crazy," I said firmly. "And your work matters. Document everything. Build relationships. And don't let anyone convince you that you're less than you are." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I filed a report today. With the new system. Because of you." After she left, I sat alone in my soon-to-be former desk and finally let myself cry. Not from pain. From relief. From gratitude. From the overwhelming weight of realizing that my silence, my strategic, documented, persistent silence, had broken a cycle that was hurting people I'd never even known about. That evening, I drove past the office one more time before heading home. Looked up at the 47th floor, where my new office waited. 6 months ago, Marcus had stood in a conference room and tried to reduce me to nothing with 2 words. Today, those 2 words felt like ancient history, like something that happened to a different person. Because here's what I'd learned. You can't make someone nothing if they refuse to believe it. You can humiliate them. You can steal their work. You can try to bury them under obstacles and fear. But you can't make them nothing if they know their own worth. And now, I finally did. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from Sarah. "Monday morning, 8 a.m. Executive Strategy Meeting. You're first as VP. Come prepared to lead. You've earned your seat at the table." I read it twice, then smiled. I'd spent 4 years waiting for permission to be excellent. Waiting for someone to notice. Waiting for my turn. I was done waiting. Monday morning, I would walk into that meeting not as the person who survived humiliation, but as the person who transformed it into power. And that made all the difference.